Welcome to the final webinar in our series Fundraising for Road Safety NGOs. In this series, we have looked at different aspects of fundraising, including fundraising strategy, networking, corporate fundraising, and log frames. The aims of this series have been to strengthen NGOs in identifying potential sources of funding and building a compelling case for the support of your work. In this webinar, Providence Klugan at Amend will lead us through an essential element of fundraising, how to develop a realistic project budget. Over to you, Providence.
So, hello everyone, my name is Providence Klugan and I work for Amend Road Safety. I'm the head accountant and I'm here today to tell you about budget and how it's important, why it's important to help you in your fundraising. So the agenda for today, we're going to start with the definition of a budget. What is a budget? Then we're going to look at why a good budget is important and how to prepare a good budget. And we're going to end with some tips about budgeting. So to start, I want to tell you a little about Amend, what we do. We do scientific research. We also do advocacy, education campaigns, and what we call minor infrastructure improvements. So this is just to help you relate to what we do, because we're all NGOs, and if you can relate to this, then you definitely relate to why it's important to have a good budget. So what is a budget? So some call it a spending plan, some call it a forecast, but basically a budget is an estimate of income and expenditures incurred to reach a set goal for a defined period. So three things are important here, as you can see in red. First of all, it's an estimate. You're trying to estimate something. Second of all, you need to have a goal. It's important for you to have a goal to know where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, or else the budget wouldn't make sense. And third, it's important to have a defined period. Is it for a month? Is it for a quarter? Is it for the year? If you don't set a time, that also wouldn't make sense. So basically, a budget describes the money that an organization plans to raise and spend for a set purpose over a given period of time. And it's really important here to notice that in a budget, you need to put your income. Mostly, some people just focus on the expenditures, the spending, but it's really important to put in whatever money you intend to have and get. So why is it important to have a good budget? For your funders, of course, because most of the money we get in are coming from our donors, and we need to convince them that the project is viable, that the project makes sense on a financial point of view. You need to show them that you have a good understanding of what the project entails and what you need to complete it. So it's important to know that a donor will not support you if he cannot confidently say that you can manage your money. And the future of your NGO and its capacity to affect the life of your community depends on your abilities to secure funding and sustain it. So it's really important to have a good budget. Secondly, and a lot of people tend to ignore this part, but a budget is important for yourself because you need to know where you're standing financially, and the budget is a tool for you to get to know that. It's also an instrument to monitor and evaluate your financial status. So it's not only when you're developing a project proposal for your donors that you have to budget, but also for yourselves. How much can you save? What do you need to keep running if you don't have any funding tomorrow? In terms of long-term sustainability, the budget is a tool to help you see into the future. So it's also important for yourself. Okay, now we're going to look at how to put together a good budget. And it all starts with using your log frame, or some will use their work breakdown structure. Basically, anything that will really help you break down your activities into the little bits. So I'm just taking an example. Probably you want to conduct a survey You want to interview some road traffic injuries victims, okay? So what do you have? You're probably gonna print some forms, probably need some transportation, some gifts for the victims. Probably you want to take some pictures. You want to pay the staff that are going to conduct this survey. So it's basically breaking down each activity, making a list of all your activities bits by bits. Then the next step is you attribute a cost to each activity. So printing is going to cost this, transportation is going to cost this, the pictures is going to cost this. And at this stage, it's really important to do intensive research. Don't just try and guess from your desk how much it's going to cost, but make calls. Call a photographer and ask him, how much is this going to cost? Ask your team, because they are on the ground. They know how much things really cost. You are probably having an overlook. So it's important to do intensive research to know, to be the most detailed possible and the most reliable possible. Once you have attributed a cost to each of your activities, then you now group your expenses into categories. So you have basically operational costs, that's your direct costs, so costs that you can directly attribute to your project. Something like transportation, something like gifts for the victims, for instance, or pictures. The photographer you're going to pay to take the pictures as a direct cost of the project. Then you have the indirect cost, that's the administrative and staff costs, that you can really attribute directly to the project, but you need to be able to estimate it and still put it in the project. So once you group your expenses, then you're ready to now put everything together. So here, as you can see, this is an example of what a budget could look like. It's important to understand that there is no specific format. It really depends on your project and its complexity. Uh, if you have a big project, it's probably going to look more complicated than what we have here. But this is a really simple example. You have your income all the way up. You sum the income, then you have your expenses, each category, as I was telling you, and then you sum your expenses as well. Then you can now do your net. This is the income minus the expenses. I would really recommend that if you do not know how to use Excel, you really try and learn, because Excel is the key to a good budget. It's really simple. You can put in your formulas, you can choose whichever format you want. Some even have some, there are even some Excel templates that are already available for budgeting. So if you do not know how to use Excel, try and get a course or go online and learn about Excel, because Excel will really help you with your budgeting. So now we're going to see and look at a few tips on budgeting. So it's important to understand that some factors cannot be controlled. You will always have surprises, so you need to prepare for those surprises. And it's important to have what we call contingency, a realistic buffer. Generally, I would recommend 10%. So if you've budgeted and at the end of the day your expenses are out of about $1,000, you wanna budget also for $100 for any contingency, anything that might happen that you cannot control. So it's important to think about that. And it's also, you need to know that the more experience you get, the less contingency you will need. So it's all about experience. Once you do this over and over again, you're going to realize that there's some surprises or some things you are able to predict in advance. So you will probably not need 10% buffer anymore. It will probably come down to 5%. It will probably come down to 2%. But you would always need to have some contingency, but then the level of contingency that you're going to need depends on your experience. Another tip is, don't underestimate the staff time your project will need, and this is very important. I know sometimes we're a bit skeptical because our funders are not always happy to see that in the budget, the staff time. But at the end of the day, it is important. You do spend time, you do spend efforts to make your project happen. So you need to put that in your budget, and you need to understand that a good donor, a good funder is always gonna recognize the time that you've put in the project. So don't put that aside. Always include your staff time, your administrative costs in your project. Secondly, the hardest project budget that you ever put together is the first one. So it gets easier as time goes on. As you do it all over again, it gets way easier. The first time is difficult because you're now trying to find a format. You're not trying to put everything together. But once you do it for the first time, the second time is easier. I'm not talking about the third, fourth, fifth time. It always gets easier. It becomes a habit and it gets more enjoyable. Another tip is it's important to provide details to your funder so that his questions can be answered in advance. So if you put something in your budget that you know your funder is not going to understand, don't wait for him to come and ask you. Put it somewhere. You can put a little asterisk in the footlines, just add an explanation. Just make it easier for the funder to understand at once. So another thing, like I was saying, is involve the whole team in the preparation of your budget. It's really important because it gives a second eye, firstly. Secondly, there are some things that the manager or the CEO cannot see. It's easier for the team on the ground to tell you how much something is going to cost. So if you really want to have a detailed budget, if you really want an accurate and efficient budget, involve your whole team. Another tip is keep track of the monitoring process of your budget to optimize future funding. So it's really important. Not what people mostly do is they budget and then they wait till the end of the project to really see what happened, like to do a comparison. But don't forget to monitor during the project. Always go back to your budget and see where you are, where you're standing. Are we under the budget? Are we over the budget? How can we adjust? It's really important to do that. And lastly, you need to understand that mistakes are precious sources of information. If you make a mistake once, don't be discouraged, learn from it, and then do better the next time. The last thing I want to share with you is the test of truth. And it says, you know you did a perfect budget when someone can understand what your project entails just by reading your budget. So if someone is able to take your budget and then just say that, oh, okay, this, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to interview some road traffic injuries. And just by reading your budget, someone is able to say that, then you know that you've made a perfect budget. So always keep that test of truth in your mind when you're doing your budgets. So thank you. I wish you all the best. And if you need any help or need any additional information, don't hesitate. You can email me and I will be glad to help you. Thank you.
And thank you, Providence. We hope that you have enjoyed this webinar and the rest of the series. We encourage you to give us feedback using the evaluation form, which can be found on the webinar page of the website. Your feedback is really important to us. It helps us to review the effectiveness and our offerings to plan future sessions. These webinars will remain online so you can listen to them whenever you like. Please feel free to share them with others. Thank you for listening and have a safe day.